This is All About the Song.
Welcome to the 138th episode of All About the Song. I am your host, Michael McDonnell, and thank you for joining us. On the podcast today, we have Carleigh Aikins, who has just released her new debut single for her upcoming album. It's called Letting You Go. She released it last week. She also released a follow-up video as a duet with Jeremie Albino. The album coming out is Loud Luxury, and I think it'll be out in the next couple months. We had a fantastic conversation. I have never met Carleigh in person, but I saw her perform with her band Foxjaws in 2009. It was an absolute incredible performance, and I added her on Facebook that night or soon after kind of thing. And I've been following her career ever since. She has performed with Bahamas, Royal Wood, Donovan Woods, Hannah Georgas. She played in the Colorado-based band Paper Bird. And for me, just kind of living my life, flipping through my phone, it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to see the artistic direction that she's taken her life. She's also a visual artist and does absolutely incredible paintings. And I really relate to that, and we talk about it because I have a painting company that's not nearly as artistic, but I hire artistic people to, keep them afloat during this pandemic. And it was really nice to communicate with Carleigh. It's a fantastic episode, and I hope that you really enjoy it. If you're watching on YouTube, you are at the Sounds Like Songs Network. Be sure to hit subscribe, hit the notification button. New episodes come out every Tuesday. So here we are, episode 138 of All About the Song, featuring Carleigh Aikins. Sorry. So you were just saying about making
it's like my second
paintings.
discipline is visual art, is painting. So I took advantage of the lockdown to just like get back into doing that, and I painted a shitload of work, which has been amazing. But yeah.
So
You've done podcasts. I've done.
Well, I got to ask you about the painting because I've seen you paint, and I mean, it's incredible. When did you start that discipline? Like, when was that?
Well, like since I've been a kid, I always had teachers like growing up that saw that I was, pretty into visual art. And I happened to have a couple teachers that were like actually artists themselves. So they would like let me stay in at recess because I hated going outside, I guess, because I didn't like physical activity. I wanted to like sit inside and paint or like learn cursive writing instead of like being outside playing. But so yeah, that started at a very young age. And then I eventually went, well, when I turned 27, I moved from Barrie and went to OCAD for a year. Like I went back to school. I was like the oldest grandma there. And that only lasted a year. Like I did the first year, excuse me. And then my friend Afi was like, just drop out of school and like, let's go on tour. So I did that instead. That was 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty fantastic.
So yeah, like with touring and whatnot, it's hard to be able to like have the time to paint. So that's why I was like, okay, now I have all this downtime. I'm just going to like get really back into it. And I did this thing called the Artist's Way, which is like a 12-step program it's basically like AA for creativity. It was like a program created in the 90s. It's pretty dated. But I did all 12 steps and like it really, I was like, I'm going to get back into my art practice. And it actually really helped. So I've been doing that while like getting ready to release this record. And yeah, it's been fun.
That's fantastic. I think it's really cool. I really have enjoyed watching the painting portion of your career in a sense because I have a painting company.
Oh, you do?
It's not as creative as the stuff you do. I do try to go towards like the murals and the accent paints and stuff.
Cool.
But yeah. I think also I'm moving towards keeping musicians gainfully employed over the pandemic.
Amazing.
So
hey, I need a job. Where can I submit my resume?
Well, and it's funny because there are some artists that are like very handy, and then there are other artists that are not handy at all.
Yeah.
And they have become my let's learn how to tape baseboards and take switch plates off. And then other people, it's like, oh my gosh, like you can just paint this whole house. And like
Right.
we've, you know, it's just because everything has changed so dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really interesting to see how people have pivoted. And if you can't tour or anything like that, like how are you going to occupy your time and maintain
Yeah.
like creativity in a sense?
Yeah, I think I've never really had like a plan B. It's just always been like the arts, that's what I'm in, you know, but when this all happened, it is a rude awakening because, you know, like there's a definite shelf life for touring, and for, you know, you're always in the back of your mind, you're like, this is gonna end at some point. I'm gonna be too old if I want to have a family, you know, whatever. So in the back of your mind, you're kind of always thinking about that. But this kind of forced me into like, well, what do you do? Who are you if you're not doing this anymore? You know? So it's been a bit of a existential, not a crisis, but it's, you know, it's like, okay, let's really assess this. And so immediately I went to painting. But I mean, again, that's a tough racket too. So I wish my fallback was like, I'll be an accountant because I love numbers, you know?
I know.
So,
Those
yeah.
that drives me crazy. There was a bass player, I think his name's Dorian Gray. He plays in Austria, and
Yeah.
he was in Spiral Beach,
Mhm.
and he was like in like the hippest band of all time, and he'd be like in the bus just like doing math equations.
Yeah.
And it always bothered me because we knew that like he would be able to like just pivot into something
Yeah, it's like,
wildly
oh, you're one of
successful
those guys that's good at math and amazing at music and
and
creativity.
cool and
Yeah, and super
personable
cool and
and
handsome and
yeah.
he got it all.
I know
Yeah.
and it's funny because it was a pretty early age, and even then we were like that guy's gonna make it somehow. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, in the survival game, I don't think he needs to survive at this.
That's
But
right. Yeah.
well, what's funny, so Carleigh, I think I've been trying to figure this out, and I've called like 3 different people if we can figure out the date and time. But
Okay.
I think I saw Foxjaws perform at the Elma Combo, and I have this very specific image
Uh-huh.
of you holding on to like a straight mic stand
Yeah.
with the mic free hand and just belting this note. And it was one of those moments where we all looked at each other and went like, oh, I can't do that. Like it
Oh,
was just incredible. And I think I've honestly been following you on Facebook ever since. And
that's
it's been so
amazing.
incredible to see all the different things that you have done since 2009. I
Yeah.
mean, this might just be my perspective, but it seems like you've been on just this absolutely amazing roller coaster of just one creative thing to another, and it just keeps kind of like getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Am
Oh.
I correct? Or
I mean, it sounds nice when you say it. It has been, I mean, yeah, since the Foxjaws days, that was like the first real band I was a part of, and my brother was the drummer. And so it felt, you know, very safe because I had like a family member, and it was, I learned a lot in that. And when that band kind of disbanded, I was pretty like devastated. I was still living in Barrie, and, you know, I was like, well, but we're going to tour the world. And, you know, to me, that was like the end of my life when that ended, because it was the first band I'd ever been a part of, and I couldn't conceive of like how to move forward from there. And then, like I said, I just kind of like took a turn and decided to move to Toronto and go to art school. And that kind of opened up a whole new chapter, which it has been. Yeah. I mean, the last 10 years have been a bit of a roller coaster, and it's been amazing. Right now, it feels like the roller coaster has stopped, and it's like, but it's funny because it is like right at a 10-year mark. And so I try to remember, you know, where I was 10 years ago and thinking like, this is the end. What's going to be next? I have no idea. And so I think I keep hearkening back to that time and being like, well, now you're more mature and it's a new like cycle, a new 10 years is about to unfold. So, but yeah, I mean, thanks for being at that show at the Elmo. I'm
Yeah.
sure it was probably either 2008 or 9, I guess. I mean,
I looked it up. It's really hard to go through the old MySpace skeletons and find
can
the
you even
show
do that?
dates. I was looking up Foxjaws and then Google searching all the bands I played in. I was trying to pinpoint why I was there, and it could have just been coincidence, but I'm glad it was. And it
Uh-huh.
obviously there was something that stuck with me of your performance. But when, or should I say, growing up in Barrie, when was the moment that you thought like music gripped you, or was there like a song or a moment or a situation where you thought you would pursue this as a career?
Well, I was heavily involved in theater in Barrie, and I worked for a theater company right out of high school called Talk is Free Theater. And so I really thought I was going to pursue stage acting and musical theater. And as I was working as an actress with that company, I was also in Foxjaws, and I'd have to, I'd be like, guys, I got a contract. We can't play shows for the next 2 months while I do this play or whatever. And so that, obviously that was like frustrating for them because we were like on a roll with like, gaining some momentum, and then it would be disrupted. So yeah, there just came a point where it was like, I'd prefer to be on stage with these people singing lyrics that I wrote as opposed to like pursuing work that other people have written. I think that's what really like compelled me to, but eventually I had to make a choice, a lifestyle choice. I guess it was also like, this seems more fun than having to be like a triple threat. At the time I was becoming a young woman, and there's so much competition in the theater world. There's a million women who are just as talented as you, if not more. And it was very competitive. And I just kind of, I wasn't resonating with that like competitive spirit, or like I guess I didn't have the disposition that it takes to like really be like, this is the industry. Let's play this game. So it just seemed like the easier choice to just then pursue doing live music. Also, again, my brother was in the band, so it was such a special time for us to like, really be able to connect and travel together and make music together. So it just seemed like the obvious choice. But I've always been, I don't know if there's like a song that was like, oh, I'm going to do that when I grow up. But I've always been obsessed with music. And I don't know, probably seeing Billy Joel play piano and sing or something for the first time was probably when I was like, rock and roll. My parents really love Billy Joel. Anyway, yeah, it just kind of naturally evolved into, well, I mean, having to make that decision. And it just seemed like the right decision for me at the time.
I never realized, coming from music and then meeting people in theater,
Mm-hmm.
when you're the bass player of the band,
Yeah.
the keyboard player or the guitar player is never gunning for your position
Right.
the way
Yeah.
that a theater is. And
Mhm.
I had that realization later on in life. But to think that, someone in the chorus also wants to be the lead,
Yeah,
it's got to be so much pressure.
totally. It is a different kind of pressure, but I mean, it still applies as I became like a kind of hired gun backing vocalist for acts. It's still like there's only so many acts that can like afford the luxury of having additional vocalists. So it is a very like competitive, and like all my female friends who are backing vocalists, like we're all gunning for the same jobs. It's very small, so it's like there is still a taste of that, and it's a challenge sometimes. Like a friend will get a gig that you were really vying for, and you're like, I'm happy for you, but I wanted that, because it's a very
Yeah.
small pool. And I've been really lucky to have worked for a lot of different artists. I feel really, really lucky that I've been able to get those gigs, because they're few and far between.
So moving from Foxjaws and feeling like, your world had ended in a sense, and going into the more hired individual artistic pursuit working for different groups. How did that first gig or how did that transition take place?
Like I said, I was going to school, and Afi is an old friend. Afi Urbanen, who's Bahamas, is an old friend that I've known for since I was a child. And he just kind of approached me. I was singing with another act with Brett Caswell, who's another Barrie musician, and we were playing a lot in Toronto. I was just kind of trying to like take any gig that I could just to like get my chops up, and also again playing with my brother. We were both in Brett's band, and Afi just came to like see us play, and I think that he saw that I was like, he was like, oh, Car's really like going for this. She's like working hard, and he offered me this job to sing with him. So, and then that was right as his like career was about to blow up. So just the timing of it, he ended up getting this like huge American tour and was like for the fall when I was supposed to go back to second year. And he was like, we just go on the road instead. You don't go back to school. And again, it was one of those decisions I was like, yes, this makes sense, and you don't have to ask me twice. And that's kind of, I think, the major mark of like when my career as like a hired gun vocalist began. And those first couple of years singing with Afi were like a crazy crash course in learning so much and watching him do his thing. So
it was interesting in the sense that, like, I remember Novato Records and seeing Bahamas poster very, throughout the city and online. And then I think it was like the LA Times did like a full write-up on him.
That's right, yeah.
And it was one of those things where I was like, oh, this like cool guitar player that I've been looking at or watching all of a sudden seems that other people are paying attention to in a whole different place, in a whole different world, in a whole different stratosphere. And it was, it must have been just absolutely insane to just all of a sudden be doing like that same thing creatively, just to more and more and more and more people in more and more places.
Yeah, it was cool to like be part of an opening band for like, and getting in front of these big audiences and really feeling like you could tell the crowd was like, oh, this is more than just like an opening band. This is like somebody special. You could really, that was like really palpable in that first tour where it's like, we kind of maybe just stole the show a little bit, like just kind of that feeling.
Yeah.
Which was exciting. And there was just like a beautiful synergy in that time that really, you could feel like something special was brewing. And I got to sit back and kind of watch my friend like, off you go, you're going, so it was a special time. Yeah. But it was long ago now. It was long ago now. It was like 10 years ago when that first tour started, which is crazy to think about. But that's what I mean, that it's like, it feels like a 10-year cycle is kind of like since that moment, that's when things really like started for me, where I started meeting, a lot of American artists, and a lot of work for me unfolded from those first couple of years. Oh, your cat's in the back there.
Yeah, they just dropped something and all exploded. Cats? Yeah, there are 3 of them.
Aw, you a cat person?
I am a cat person, yes.
Love it.
Morty Mayonnaise and Connie B.
Cute.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that was, I don't know what I was saying, but that's...
I also just being around musicians and stuff like that and starting to enter those stratospheres has got to be fantastic for just networking and being in front of people, and all of a sudden other artists start thinking like, oh, this is a singer. We need a singer.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask how, a singer from Barrie, Ontario ends up joining a band in Colorado.
Well, again, like I think I met those guys when Bahamas was at South by Southwest in like 2012. I had some friends from the road that were like, we all were there. That was a really fun year because there was like Zeus from Barrie they were all there, those boys, and like who are my best friends. And it was fun. There was a lot of like Barrie Toronto crew there that year, but I ended up going to Luck, Texas, which is like Willie Nelson's ranch, where they do festivals there every year now. But I went, and that's where I met the Paperbird kind of one of the members, the guitar player Paul DeHaven, and we kind of like, you know, had great, like we had a really good time and we got along, and he ended up we ended up kind of staying in touch as friends. And then it was funny, like right as I left Bahamas and was kind of trying to figure out what was going to go down next, I was in Austin again and got like a phone call from them. I didn't know them very personally. I knew Paul, like we'd become kind of buds, and we'd like sent some songs back and forth to each other. But they essentially kind of knew me like from Bahamas. And they just were like, one of our members left. We have shows booked that we still want to follow through with. Would you want to like join the band? And I was like, yeah, or like, can you get me to Colorado? And they were like, yeah, we'll cover all of that. Just, you know, so it kind of just, it was another like serendipitous thing, because the timing was like, I really wasn't sure what was going to happen next. And I got this opportunity and was like, okay, I'm just going to say yes. I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm just going to go for it. And then, yeah, ended up kind of living in Colorado for the next few years as we made a record. We made a record in Nashville with, we met John Oates from Hall & Oates, and he ended up producing the record. And we toured that for a couple years. I don't know, it just kind of was a magical, like all of a sudden I found that myself living in like the magical mountains on this like ranch. It was pretty dreamy with like,
Yeah, it's got to be insane.
yeah. It was also a really hectic time because I was still like doing work in Toronto. So I would be like flying. I was on flights, so many flights through that time. I felt like I like lived at the airport, and I would like play a show in Toronto that would end at 2 a.m. And then I'd go to the airport and fly to Colorado and like get in the van and drive through the mountains to go play a show. And so it was like, it was a whirlwind, but it was like not very sustainable for me. I was like getting clinically exhausted, basically. And I think about that time, I was like, I don't know how I pulled all of that off, but somehow I did. But I don't know that it would have been sustainable for much longer than it was. It was kind of just this little like blip of like, this is your lifestyle for a sec. But
yeah,
but I definitely, I was so like welcomed into that community. The Denver music scene is really beautiful and really insular, and there's a huge culture of like, you know, communal living, DIY shows. So it's very like, it's insular and it's very supportive. And so I just immediately felt like part of this like really tight-knit community, and it was an amazing thing, and I miss it a lot. It was really hard to like leave there and just be like, okay, bye, my family of, you know, 60, 70 people that I really love. So that's been hard. And it's been hard now not being able to travel and not being able to like get out there and see everybody. But that's life. Just gotta learn to let go.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's got to be great too, because I'm sure like, especially at the beginning, the idea of like the Toronto being like the big city per se, being like an hour away from where you grew up,
Yeah.
and having like a developing community here, and then to be transported somewhere else and to see like that there are these other musical communities that are more advanced or different or have different priorities or are able to sustain themselves. That was probably a really unique kind of like A-B comparison, or A-B-C-D-E-F comparison.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing to like enter into this, again, like tight-knit community that had been, the band I joined had already been a band for like 8 or 9 years by the time I joined. So they had like, so I had to learn this like deep history that they had as a band with other members and the member I was replacing. And yeah, I mean, most of my Toronto friends, we've all known each other for 30 years, and grown up as kids playing music. So it was cool to see, like, to step into a new group that was just as tight knit and had that history. And it was like, whoa, now I'm like learning a whole other history. It was amazing. But with that, I think I always kind of had this sense of like that I was a bit of an outsider, because there's no way for me to ever really like, I was like the new kid, the new Canadian kind of thing. So I always and everyone's parents would be at the shows, and my parents like had never seen the band because they're in Toronto. There's lots of things where it was like so lovely and so welcoming, but I always kind of felt a little bit like lonely and out of place a little,
I play in a Russian band in Toronto called
Okay.
Jumple, and
Uh-huh.
they don't even speak English at band practice. So
Wow.
I
Yeah,
sort
you
of
know that feeling.
yeah, I sort of know what you're talking about without
I
the
mean, at least
travel.
I could speak the language.
Yeah. I mean, I know the swear words, and I know the good ones.
Right.
But I relate to that, because you're stepping into not someone else's shoes, but the history. And you gotta kind of look around, and then somebody shows up one day and everyone goes, Bruce, or in my case, Eugene, and then you're like, who's this?
Comrade.
Yeah, and then they all start, and then you're like, oh, okay. And it's like being the new kid in school. Like, it takes a couple years to like find the place that you're in, and then one day somebody says something, and you're like, oh, okay, I've like carved a spot now. Interesting.
Yeah, totally. And they were, again, like the greatest people they were so open and warm and loving, and they treated me like as their own. But yeah, there was always that like, but I don't really have that full history. And I was replacing someone that had a long history with the band, so there was that added element of feeling never like I could like fill those shoes fully, and fans coming up after the show and saying like, we miss her, where's she? And you're like, it's just me now, So there was that added little element that kind of not complicated things, but it was challenging at times where I just felt like, oh, I'll never be enough, So it's a definite learning experience, but it was an amazing, we had the best time, and we traveled everywhere. We traveled across America 10 times over, and it was an absolute, it was the best. I miss it a lot. I miss those guys a lot.
And the United States it's funny, because I think there's a Canadian perspective of like what we see on television, but to actually see the United States is kind of amazing in comparison, not in comparison to Canada, but it's just so much different than here in so many different ways. You can travel more than one direction. Like just that alone.
And like 2 hours away, there's an amazing city that you can go play music in, and with incredible venues. Yeah, it's very different than, I don't think we ended up doing like a Canadian American tour with the Night Sweats with Nathaniel Rateliff that started in Canada and made our way to like the West Coast and into America. But yeah, just trying to describe to them like, no, you don't understand. Like when we're mapping out, it's like the next closest city is like a 14-hour drive or whatever, And they're like, what? Like, and then you get to the West Coast of America, and it's like, okay, we're Portland, Seattle. Like, it's just like all the way down, So it's very, very different. And it's such an incredible country. And I mean, I was there when Trump was elected, and kind of watched that whole era unfold, which is very interesting, because like I have so much love for the country and for the cities and the people. But yeah, watching that go down was like, the fuck is going on here? There's, it's also really bizarre, a really bizarre place and a lot of like shootings were happening, there was all kinds of energy that was like, part of me really just wants to be back in my little Canadian like safety net. It was also really exciting yeah. Anyway, America is a beautiful, complicated place, and I'm really, really lucky to have like been to most of the states and played most of the cities there. It's pretty awesome.
I have to ask about, you've played with so many fantastic artists, but I have to ask about one in particular because I listen to his music almost every day, and it's
Who's
Donovan
this?
Woods.
Royal Wood?
No, I will ask about Royal Wood,
Okay.
but Donovan Woods.
Oh, Dono, yeah.
What's it like playing with Donovan Woods? I interviewed one of the engineers on his album and never asked about it, and I was so upset. I have a group of friends that are all huge Donovan Woods super fans.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is about his music that is just like something that I almost listen to every day. I just started listening to his acoustic The Other Way album. But what was it like performing with him?
Oh my God, he's the best. I mean, I wish I could perform with him more than I have. It's funny, just one of my actor friends that I knew from theater lived with him. So I met him like, I don't know, 20 years ago. They lived together and he's like, I'm a musician. I'm like, yeah, me too. And and cut to like 10 years later, I'm like, oh, he's like, here he goes. He's blown up. And he invited me to sing. It's one of my biggest regrets. He invited me to like sing on a whole record at one point early on. And I was like, I'm at the cottage that month. Like I was like away and I couldn't do it. And to this day, I'm still like, why didn't you take that opportunity? That's one of my big regrets of my career. Anyway, I love working with Donovan. He's like the funniest, sweetest. It's funny, like if I've ever gone to like rehearse with him, it's just him, like I'll show up and just him with his guitar in like a boardroom at like the conservatory or something. And I'm like, okay, we're gonna like run some songs, and he just like tells jokes and makes me laugh and shoots the shit. And he's like, oh yeah, you want to practice a song? And he'll like maybe play it once. And I'm like, okay. So he's just like a delight and such a talented, really genuine, like what you see is what you get with him. There's no bullshit. It's not like a put on that it's like, he seems like a nice guy. He actually is like the sweetest, most generous dude. Yeah, I mean, I have worked with him. I wish I could work with him more, but yeah.
Well, one of my best friends is the drummer in Shawn Mendes, who I've had on this podcast many times. His name's Mike Sleeth.
Yeah.
And the star power that Mike Sleeth has.
That's that guy.
Oh yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
He doesn't have star power at all, but I mean that in a nice way.
Sure he does.
But he does. But he uses it all to talk to Donovan Woods on Instagram, or at least he did previously. That was like his whole. It's like Donovan Woods is writing back to. I'm blowing you up, Mike. I'm sorry, but he was like so excited that, and it was like all it reminded me of is when one of the bigger kids in the schoolyard like acknowledges you.
Yeah,
he's like, yeah, okay. And
he knows who I am, man.
Yeah. And Mike keeps going like, can I play drums for you, please? Like, and he's like, just play the stadiums, buddy. I'll take care of the clubs. And I thought it was like such an endearing thing. But I mean, yeah, what an incredible talent. And it's
and just like really genuinely like he's just got star power because he's like so funny and so down to earth, and like, he's like whatever, self-deprecating at times and stuff, but he's just really like I think people connect with him because he's just so like, he's just like, I'm just a regular average guy, but I'm actually like insanely talented, and I'm in Nashville writing songs for Keith Urban and shit, but yeah, he's just so humble, and yeah, great dude, great artist, love that guy. Hey, Dono, if you're watching this, hey.
I also wanted to ask about Royal Wood, who you've performed with many times.
Yeah. What about him?
Just anything. I just like the fact that you perform with him. He's just generally fantastic.
I've been singing with him for like 8 or 9 years now or something, which is crazy. And at any time getting to work with Royal, like just touring with that crew, is the best. It's just so easy and lovely, and you're always really well taken care of, and you're playing in beautiful theaters, and it's just fun. I mean, I love those guys, and I've been playing with them for so long. So it's like anytime we get to do little tours, I'm just like, yay, family road trip, you know? And I'm really grateful to him for being able to work with him for so long. But, you know, right now he's just out on his family farm, renovating a farmhouse, raising a kid. We actually, during the pandemic, got to play a couple shows with some orchestras, which was amazing. And those were kind of like my only shows during COVID lockdown were playing with symphonies. So it was incredible. And it was really nice to get to do that. Yeah.
Did it feel weird?
It did feel weird. I mean, it felt weird because of like the privilege of it all, you know, especially at a time when I think a lot of artists are kind of really like being introspective about our privilege. Yeah. And what I mean by that is just that like all my friends were out of work, you know, and then for a minute you're like, I've got a gig today. And it's just like this elaborate, insane
Yeah, but
occurrence.
I guess we're going to sound check after the oboes get in tune.
Yeah, totally. And like I was like playing percussion with the orchestra. I was like, I'm a symphony percussionist. Like felt so cool. But it was weird. Yeah, it was very, I mean, in order to have 70 people on a stage, it was like I just had to be like quarantined in my dressing room by myself. You know, it was still, and that was still very early on in the pandemic time. So yeah, it was a bit like you don't see anybody before the show, you're just alone, and then you go out and it's like, okay, now I'm on stage with 70 people. It was amazing. It was fun to do that.
I want to ask about Junk Jewelry.
Yeah.
Your upcoming album. Congratulations on releasing Letting You Go. It's an absolutely
thanks.
unbelievable song.
Is that the song we're talking about for this episode?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
My
the whole
latest
album.
Single. Yeah.
Yeah. I try. I mean, usually it's a good time to contact an artist to be on a podcast when they are releasing stuff. But also I've just, just generally, I think that there's so much that leads towards a release per se. Yeah. And I think that the songs like Letting You Go, and you just released a feature with Jeremie Albino as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this new music, and how do you feel about like the creative process of working on it? Are you excited about the release? Was it easy? Was it hard, like without the same distractions per se, working on an album?
Well, it was made easier, first of all, because I was given a really generous grant from Canada Council, which like changed everything for me, because I'd always been like, yeah, one day I'll like work on that solo thing, but it was so easy to just like take another tour and kind of put that off. So when I got that grant, it was like really validating for me, and also just allowed that space for me to like finally settle down and focus on it, to just have like a bit of financial support to do that. But it's been a long process. Like that process began like 2.5 years ago when I got that grant. I'm actually like, today is my final deadline to like close up that grant. It's finally here. It's been a long process, and it was kind of maybe a bit of a scattered process, because I'd just been so used to like, you tour with your band, you try out these new songs, you go in the studio, you record them all together. And this was a totally different approach, because it was like my demos, then I'd have to have bands arrange them, and then, get into the studio without ever playing them live, and kind of just let them live in the studio how they were going to unfold. So it was a very different process for me. But I'm really thrilled with how it all turned out. I worked with a lot of different people. And at first I thought maybe this will, that's part of the meaning behind the title Junk Jewelry, but maybe it'll seem too much of a hodgepodge of different sounds and production styles. And then just was like, my voice is the common thread of this. It's all going to make sense. And also the album is like a collection of songs that were written over like 13 years. So there's a lot of different, like, it is like a collection, you know, of a lot of an eclectic group of songs and styles, which is interesting because sometimes it's like, what kind of music is this? It's just adult contemporary, I think, is what we've decided to call it. I don't know. But yeah, I got to work with some really amazing people. I got to work a lot in Quebec with like a whole new crew of people that I'd never worked with before. And I also then was back in Toronto working with people I'd grown up with. So it was a nice balance of like getting out of my comfort zone and working with people I'd never worked with before. And then also leaning into like, you know, where I felt most comfortable, which was with my buds who I've been playing music with forever. So yeah, I worked with Marcus Paquin, who is he's produced stuff for, you know, bands like Arcade Fire and The National and Tim Baker and then a lot of women like The Weather Station and Begonia and Harmer. He just kind of did all their records as well. So a lot of my girlfriends were like, had worked with him as well. And that was an amazing experience. Yeah, just to work with like, obviously I've worked with producers before, like I said, like John Oates or something, but I don't know. He's just like such a talented musician. So he kind of like really gets that side of things, but also is like, he's a friggin' whiz at like watching him like piece together a take and stuff. You're just like, what? Like he's just so proficient at engineering as well. So it's he's like a really rare, and then he like plays the bass. And anyway, it was a real joy to work with him. Worked with Brad Barr from the Barr Brothers on Letting You Go, which was like total dream because he's my bud, but he's like my favorite guitar player. So that was fun. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just rambling now about all.
No. Well, I'll ask. Like, was this nerve-wracking? Like, I kind of had the same experience where I was like, I'm gonna do my album, and then it was like, and now all the emotion from a decade is going to pour out of me, and I'm gonna have to like collect myself together and maybe be the director or be the lead or.
Right.
And I always found myself kind of metaphorically being like, who needs coffee? I'll go to get coffee. And they're like, no, you got to sing. Like, you got to tell us what to do. Like, and I'm like, no, I'm better. You want a beer? Like, and I just always kept trying to like sweep up after everybody. And they were like, you're the lead. Like, was that like a difficult transition for you? Being something you had been working towards for so long.
Yeah, it certainly is like I said, I'm so used to leaning on like band members where it's like, this is a group effort. And to then step into like, no, this is you. And you have to make these decisions and you have to articulate your ideas and assert yourself. It's a totally new muscle being exercised. I had a lot of support from my partner at the time who was also a musician and was kind of like, you always, when you're doing solo stuff, as much as it's like forward facing, this is me, and yeah, I have to like figure out like how I'm going to present this, but you always have people in your corner helping you. It's never like a totally solo endeavor, you know?
But you feel it differently.
You do definitely feel it differently. And I think for me, it was like, it's okay to ask for help and to say like or to admit like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need, I think for a long time it was like, no, this has to be all me and it's me and I'm a strong woman and I'm independent. And I'm going to do this on my own. And it's like, no, it's okay to like know where your strengths are and know where you need assistance. So yeah, I think a big part of for me was just like surrendering a bit of that and being like, you don't have to do everything yourself. You can have help and it's still yours, in the end. But yeah, it has been, I mean, especially now that it's done and you're doing like the whole rollout and you have to come up with all this content and shit.
It's
all
worse.
by myself. I'm just
that's
like,
the worst part of it. I know, like, that's why this podcast exists. Because I didn't know how to support an album.
Yeah.
And then I had a friend that talked about not knowing how to support an album, and we just were talking on the phone. I was walking down a street, and I was like, "Oh, this is how we're gonna do it, I suppose. Like
Cool.
we'll just talk about it, and then we'll put it out." And I'm sure that there are other people that feel this way, and
Right.
I mean, you're the 138th person that feels this way.
Amazing. It's
You know?
amazing. Yeah.
And what's nice, though, I will say, like, not to say that I know any better at all, but I think that is like the artist's struggle right now is this next part of putting things out. And I don't know. I think the best way to do it, and this is like no answer, but is just to kind of be yourself and do the like lean in on your strengths, just like
Totally.
you would on as the artist recording stuff.
Right.
It's like it's almost like a second album like thing you're doing in support of it.
Yeah.
That being said, the visuals that you've put out so far are amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
And as you know, I think the thing is like as artists, you'd like to be like, oh wow, that's a cool bass track and that's a cool thing. And I like the way the vocals sound and stuff. But we also have to be like, oh, I like how her profile picture has an MP, like, you know, has a some sort of visual. Like, oh, I like how they did this. This is really cool because it's part of the art in a sense. And you
Totally.
being a visual artist as well, I'm sure, is a massive strength to add to this.
It is helpful. I'm such a grandma who can't use Zoom, and I'm also like so old school. I'm like, I paint onto the canvas. I don't know how to do this digitally, you know? So my brother is a very gifted graphic designer, fortunately. He's one of those guys that's like, oh, he's real good at drums, but he also can fall back on a real job, you know?
Yes.
My brother is insanely talented. And so he, you know, together we kind of came up with the visual concept, and he's been delivering all of that. So I'm so lucky to like have his help. And yeah, it is like there's so many components that you have to like be constantly considering. And you know, it's like I was putting in all this effort to like get the record done, and then you're like, oh, and now I have to like come up with the visuals and stuff. So I've kind of just been like doing it as I go along. And I hope that it will have continuity. Again, almost like the record where it's like, I'm doing this with a lot of different people. Is it gonna not be consistent? But yeah, we've just kind of been like creating it as we go, which has been fun. It's like spontaneous, but it's also like putting a song out every month, you're like, oh, I have to have 10 videos to go with that or whatever. It's like, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And especially because I haven't even played these songs live for anyone. And this is not how I expected to release it, you know, where it's like, none of you have heard this or seen the band ever. Anyone want to take a listen? You know, it's like very much because of the climate of the world right now. It is a weird time to be putting music out and to be like launching a new thing. But
I think that what would be nice, or what can be nice, is that you can use all these different digital mediums now, and then when you play live, it's almost like you'll have a whole second wind.
For sure, yeah.
And you know that you're able to do that too, and
Yeah.
it's kind of exciting because you'll almost have like two lives of this in a sense.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's, you know, we're trying to like draw out the release as long as we can so that, because once the record's out, it's kind of like, and the cycle's done, you know, and of course, you'll tour, you know, for a couple of years on that cycle, but you need to be like writing a new record in that time as well. So I think we want to just, try to like draw it out so that maybe next summer we can still be like, you know, doing the festival circuit or something on this record. Because I really want it to like have its due time. I want these songs, that's the thing, like these songs are best and most joyful, even though I haven't really ever performed them live, but I know that it's like they're going to shine the most when I have the band and I have multiple vocalists singing all the parts with me. And because I know that that's like really how I connect is when people like see me live, not to like toot me own horn or whatever, but
That's why we're having this conversation right now.
Yeah, so you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I just want people to hear me sing this stuff, and then it'll really like that'll be the final like connector, I think. But right now it's just like it's not the same as like people having that experience with the songs, as you know. But anyway, hopefully that time will come for this record for sure. I don't want it to like miss that whole portion of time.
I think
some
that
silly virus.
yeah, I think we're gonna. I think that universally we'll have to be pretty forgiving of artistic output.
Yeah.
Because they're like, I feel bad. There's an artist. His name escapes me right now, and he put all his time and effort and like money into a TTC subway campaign in April 2020, and like so obviously got pulled. But I want him to be able to do that. Like, if I saw that campaign in a couple of months, hopefully, I'm not going to look at it and say like, oh, that album actually was written in 2019. Right. Like, I think that people are going to be very forgiving. And I think that there'll be a lot of allowance to play songs that may be a year old, but live, they're brand new. And
I know. I mean, so many of my colleagues have put records out in this time. And yeah, it kind of feels like, okay, like it's very anticlimactic. And we've all kind of said like, is there a thing where you can like re-release a record again? That, you know, like I had friends that were about to launch their records in May, and then it was like, nope. And then this record kind of just like isn't heard in the way that it should be heard. And yeah, there is definitely those conversations of like, just do the cycle again when things, you know, like there's no shame in being like, yes, this record is now 2 years old, but it didn't get its due time.
No.
I think hopefully audiences will be forgiving of that. And yeah, I hope that's what we see, because there's so many good records that have come out in this year that haven't really gotten their due time. You know what I mean? So we'll see. We'll see how she goes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing the podcast. I'm really glad to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. So Carleigh, what's next for you?
Just, you know, prepping for the album's coming out in its entirety in August. And so just kind of looking forward to that. Hopefully doing a big live stream, you know, proper release show for that. And painting my paintings. And hopefully soon getting to play some live shows. Fingers crossed that's in our near future. But, you know, otherwise I'm just trying to get by and live life. And yeah. What's next for you?
I don't know. I'm hoping. What is next for me? Just the itch. I'm hoping to scratch that itch. I'm starting to see some artists playing in the park, like some brass bands and stuff.
Yeah.
And I play in a violin band who lives across the street from Christy Pitts. And
yeah, that's where I live.
Do you really?
Yeah. When can I see this band?
Oh,
are you gonna play in the park?
Maybe this afternoon.
Really?
No.
Let me know.
Well, his name's Dr. Draw. Dr. Draw in the Strange Parade.
Okay, awesome.
I'll tell you exactly where he lives because he's off air, but thank you, Carleigh. Maybe you'll see you later today.
I would love to do that. It's a beautiful day.
I'd like to thank Carleigh for being on the podcast. Be sure to check out her new song, Letting You Go. There's also the duet with Jeremie Albino. They're both on her YouTube page, which there will be a link for in this description. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions for a guest you'd like to hear on the podcast, send us an email, allaboutthesongpodcast@gmail.com. We are at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and wherever you do, please hit rate and review No, rate and review. Leave us a message. Say something wonderful. I'll love you forever. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Hit the notification button to the Sounds Like Songs Network, which is our YouTube channel and our network that we are going to absolutely take over the world with sonically. We have some really cool new things coming up. We are still in lockdown in Ontario, but I was asked by a music booker in the city if I would do a monthly musical show. And so it looks like the All About the Song showcases that we started in 2019 will be returning whenever we are allowed to do so, which is something to look forward to say the least. We will have ability to see the artists that you've listened to on this podcast. And the last 60 of them have been not able to perform in front of people. And so now we're going to have an opportunity to have everyone get together, play new songs, try new things out. The idea is kind of like how a comedian gets to play like clubs throughout the week before they do theaters and showcase shows around the world on the weekends. I want to do that same thing and allow artists the chance to maybe try out a song or play a show without having to, put out a CD or a release and do all this promotion. We'll do it under this umbrella and see how it goes. And if fans of this podcast are able to meet, that's fantastic. Artists that have been on the podcast will be able to meet. You'll be able to meet your favorite artists. You'll be able to find new friends. And perhaps you will find the person like I found Carleigh Aikins to follow for the last decade at an event like this. So for Carleigh Aikins, I am Michael McTennell. Episode 138 of All About the Song is in the books. We will see you next week.